This next part of our presentation presents some technology details on how the 5 tenets of 21st century flood risk wisdom are in fact becoming a reality. Up until recently, the National Flood Insurance Program has been widely used across the country to characterize flood hazard and risk. As mentioned previously, Congress created the NFIP 50 years ago with a stopgap binary approach due to the high cost of developing location-specific flood hazard curves. This and other technical hurdles hampered pricing flood risk for due diligence and the development of reasonable actuarial costs for insurance. The NFIP approach focuses on mapping of a special flood hazard zone based on an estimate of the 1% annual chance flood, the 1 in 100 year return flood. As we saw earlier, the AEP is really a 26% chance flood over a 30-year mortgage. And compared to the wisdom of a location-specific full-spectrum fuzzy cumulative hazard curve, relying on a single special zone is grossly obsolete. Importantly, NFIP flood insurance rate maps are often decades old and antiquated in the rainfall, hydrologic, and hydraulic conditions assessed for delineating their special zones. Importantly, under the NFIP, firms do not provide any indication of the huge uncertainty in the special hazard zone footprint or its associated flood elevation. For example, the uncertainty associated with the special hazard zone flood levels is typically much more than the uncertainty in the local rainfall frequency we described previously. In fact, the NFIP special zones might really have twice the advertised probability, which in turn equates to a 50-50 chance over a 30-year mortgage. And furthermore, the maps do not incorporate any estimate of future changes in flood hazard. The NFIP's emphasis of a binary flood hazard is coupled with a premium structure that doesn't appropriately reflect expected annual cost. This premium structure unfairly underprices high risk and overprices modest risk. This has the effect of actually discouraging households at modest risk from purchasing flood insurance. The NFIP's distortion of flood hazard and risk confuses a wide range of property valuation, investment, insurance, and mitigation decisions. On top of this, the NFIP doesn't provide many households and businesses with good coverage options. The current NFIP thus presents many impediments to resiliency. Earlier, 3 foolish approaches to flood hazard and risk were noted. Overly relying on the NFIP can be just as bad. Due to the limitations of the current NFIP, there has been growing interest in the past decade in approaches which provide flood risk scores or factors. The one shown here has received a lot of media attention in recent weeks, as it claims to rank flood risk on a scale of 1 to 10 for 155 million parcels across the U.S. But as stated before, qualitative ranking of flood risk only represents a less foolish approach, as it dumbs down what should be the wise approach of pricing the location-specific flood risk for every individual property. As pointed out earlier, concern for climate change is driving demand for better flood risk due diligence in the financial sector, from Wall Street on down. This means more demand for pricing flood risk, and this means more demand for flood hazard curves, and this means analyzing future changes in scenarios. And this in turn fuels demand for even better flood risk due diligence and more and better flood risk pricing. The fact is, we are now in the middle of a rapidly accelerating cycle of expectations for the standard of practice for flood risk due diligence and resiliency. What makes this cycle a reality are four dramatic technological advances in ultra-high resolution geospatial data, GIS software, two-dimensional flood modeling codes, and analytics. As another indication of how these advances are capable of transforming flood risk due diligence, just consider what's available today in online real estate information and flood forecasting compared to just a few years ago. First and foremost is the advance of ultra-high resolution geospatial data. These data, with accuracy down to the 1 meter spatial level, are crucial to supporting individual household and business property flood risk decisions. The proliferation of this data, of course, matches what we've all seen in the proliferation of high definition in all types of consumer imaging products. 8 advances have really keyed the evolution in flood risk. First is seamless aerial imagery, which we've all used in many computer and cell phone map, weather, and other apps. Second is dense LiDAR data, a special aerial remote sensing technology for obtaining ground topography. Third is the use of the LiDAR data to create up-to-date topographic digital elevation models, or DEMs, like the one of the Amite River Basin shown in the figure. There are now apps for your cell phone that will give you the LiDAR-based DEM elevation at just about any location. Over the last 20 years, DEMs have become increasingly denser and more accurate, as well as faster and cheaper to produce. Fourth is delineation of detailed hydrography, the flow lines of streams and shorelines of lakes and coasts, down to the major local neighborhood scale drainage feature, together with watershed boundaries down to the local catchment scale. Fifth is then the development of digital terrain models, or DTMs, in which the hydrography is hydro-enforced into the DEM. This simply involves removing artificial crossings such as bridges, as demonstrated in the figure. In addition, any available channel and lake bathymetry is superimposed or burned in. A complete, accurate, ultra-high resolution DTM is the foundation for developing flood hazard curves for every property. Sixth is land cover data to analyze detailed runoff rates. Seventh is the individual property boundaries themselves. And the eighth data are the actual asset footprints and associated attributes, including information on typical flood damage costs over a range of depths according to the asset attributes. Ultra-high resolution geospatial data are rapidly becoming available for many areas of the country. The remaining data gaps are naturally a big focus for those working to improve flood risk due diligence. This picture shows an example of an outdated hydrography flow line that the USGS is currently actively promoting to update. Filling ultra-high-resolution geospatial data gaps remains the most time-consuming and expensive, but the most important step in improving flood risk due diligence. The second big technological evolution responsible for the advancing reality of flood risk wisdom and due diligence is Geographic Information System, GIS, software, analogous to the rise in digital image processing software. GIS software has evolved to be able to smoothly and efficiently utilize and process the petabytes of ultra-high resolution geospatial data. These massive data files are downloaded via fiber optic from cloud storage at rates in the gigabytes and transferred to super-fast solid-state drives. GIS software tools now make numerous important tasks with these huge data sets routine, along with spatial analyses. And WebGIS programs now allow the public to easily work with ultra-high spatial resolution data. Many of you have used Google Earth, and without knowing it, most of you have been to websites and followed links to smart maps that use ArcGIS Online or similar WebGIS programs. These WebGIS programs are particularly important to communicating accurate parcel-scale flood risk information to individual households. The third technological revolution is analogous to computer-generated imagery in movies. In the wake of Hurricane Katrina in 2005, there was tremendous government investment in advancing two-dimensional coastal flood simulation techniques. In the last decade, developments have spearheaded increasing application of these 2D simulation techniques to river floodplains. The availability of ultra-high resolution geospatial data has recently made inland 2D flood modeling increasingly feasible and attractive. Modeling codes have been written to take advantage of these data as well as leverage the declining cost of enormous computational power with parallel CPUs and more recently GPUs. Competition between code developers has produced amazing improvements in modeling for flood forecasts, hindcasts, and scenarios. Today, flood modeling codes are in a state of rapid advancement, particularly in four areas. 1. Incorporation of all four types of flood exposure: flash, riverine, backwater, and coastal. This includes combining rain-on-grid and runoff hydrology with floodplain hydraulics, coastal wind and wave-driven dynamics, and various flow physics all into a single code. 2. Automation of model development including geometry straight from DTMs and automating calibration. 3. Further enhancing model capabilities to handle ultra-high resolution input. And 4. Eliminating the tedious, costly step of adjusting coarse model results to high-resolution online maps. With these ongoing advances, some models, like the CGI scenes in older movies, may have a short shelf life. The fourth technology advance has been in employing the geospatial data, GIS software, and 2D model codes in flood hazard analysis itself, again largely associated with exponential increases in computation power. Along with computation power, the development of higher programming languages such as MATLAB, R, and Python has enabled managing analyses at truly massive data scales. As a result, hydrologists can run and analyze the thousands of simulations necessary to creating more naturalistic synthetic records, such as with storms mimicking more realistic spatial temporal variations in rainfall and hurricane wind fields. As we discussed previously, simplifying a synthetic record has been a major source of the huge uncertainty in flood hazard curves. The new analytic tools also enable modifying synthetic records to assess important long-term changes in sea level, rainfall frequency, floodplain morphology, and land cover. Improved analytics enables improved evaluation of benefit cost and return on investment for property valuation, insurance, and mitigation, especially the evaluation of various what-if alternatives. Analytics can readily aggregate flood risk pricing to evaluate community projects, and Monte Carlo analyses using thousands of additional simulations can be performed to examine the impact of varying assumptions and factors of uncertainty. In sum, the state-of-the-art in geospatial data, GIS software, 2D flood modeling, and analytics is finally making 21st century flood risk wisdom a reality. Technology is finally enabling the standard of practice for flood risk due diligence and resiliency to match that used for wind and fire risk. So much so that in the very near future, we all will have easy online access to flood risk pricing for every property. In the last video, we'll point out 10 government policies that can help spread the gospel of 21st century flood risk wisdom. Please don't hesitate to email, text, or call me with comments and questions.